I don't know if any of you have ever made a cabinet door. I have not. Last week I actually did make a cabinet door for the first time ever. I've done a lot of projects. I actually built cabinets in the house, but I've never made a door. And that was quite intimidating. If you're anything like me, I don't want to waste material. Wasting material is a waste of money, a waste of time, and a waste of some good wood. So what I did, and what I'm going to show you what I did, is I used some of that particle board that I have left over as my rail and stiles, just to see how well it would work. And it did. So I'm going to go ahead, get the fence out, get the saw all fired up, and we're going to go ahead and go through the process of making a door. I'm not going to actually make one right now, but we're going to actually go through the steps so that you can try it and not waste the material just the way I did it. So I didn't waste the material, so when it comes time to do the real door, I'm set and I'm ready to do it. So here we go. First thing we're going to want to do is get the saw set up and cut some strips of the particle board down to 2 inches, because that's the width of the rail and stile that I'm currently using. Okay, so we got 4 strips cut, 2 inches. So now let's get those cut down to the correct length for the rest of the door. Now, I know from some measurements that I've taken before, I want my doors to be 23 3/4 of an inch tall. The door opening for this door here is actually 21 13/16. The hinges I have are 1/2 inch overlay. I've been able to actually stretch that out to 9/16 because, well, I prefer just a little bit more. So we got 9/16 times 2, basically 18/16, or the equivalent. We've got 1 1/8. So that's, I've got to add to my 21 13/16, and that'll give us the width of our door. We've got 22 15/16. Now, what I did on the previous doors is I made my my dado cut. I made it a 1/2 inch deep. Worked out just fine. I think I'd like to go a little bit more, maybe. I don't know. But in this case here for the test, I'm going to keep it the same, 1/2 inch. But what I'm going to do different is, last time I used just my regular Freud blade here, which leaves a weird V because the teeth are not flat. I did have a gentleman a while back, when I got the Shopfox fence, actually gave me a dado set. I can't use a dado set on this table saw because the arbor is not long enough. So what I can do though is use the one blade from that dado set because it's flat, and that's what I'm going to do a little bit different this time, is use that. We're going to go ahead and cut that dado right down the center of our boards here before we cut them all down to length, and we're going to go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and get that set up right now. I'm setting this up. I like to use a scrap piece of wood, and I've got my marks here where I roughly want it to be. So what I'm going to do is, I've got the dado blade in there. I'm going to run 2 passes on through this scrap piece of wood real quick, make sure that everything is lined up before I actually run my real rails and stiles. Always unplug your saw when you're changing the blade. flip the board around. A little bit of leftover gunk. This is the material that I was using for the door panels. Oh, look at that. That is a good fit. Almost too good. And one thing I want to point out is that is nice and flat by using the dado blade. Makes life a lot nicer. So let's run some real material now. Maybe one of my projects needs to be a feather board. Okay, so now I got all my grooves cut. They turned out great. Perfect. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to actually change out blades so I can rip these here down to length. And then I'll change back to the dado blade so I can actually take and chip these off. Back in a minute. One of the first things I want to do is I want to actually hold these two together and cut one end off to square them up. I'll roll them over and I'll cut them down to length. That way I know for sure that the two are the same length together. Don't throw these away, because guess what, we're going to test with these, or we might make a drawer front out of them. I got a few of those to make as well. Okay, now rails are cut. I know that I want the whole door to be 22 and 15/16 wide. First thing we need to do is we need to subtract 4 inches because that's the width of our rails. That leaves us with 18 and 15/16. I know that we should be at roughly a 1/2 inch dado here. Gonna want to verify that, of course. 1/2 inch. Good job. 1/2 inch for each one. I got to add an inch back. So that leaves us at 19 and 15/16. So our stiles, that's how long they got to be. So now that that's all cut, we just need to go ahead and switch back to the dado blade and clean these ends up. So that's what I'm going to do real quick now. So now we want to make some fine adjustments, and that's where having a leftover piece comes in real handy. Setting the blade depth to where I think it's supposed to be, but I'm going to make a quick pass just to make sure that it only removes the material that we want to and not the rest of it. So I'm going to try that real quick. Very nice fit. Now is where things get fun and interesting. Got our stop block clamped on there. We're going to go ahead and run a couple passes and make sure that it's correct. But again, we're not just going to use any board, we're going to use a scrap. Nice and tight join for the most part. Could be a little deeper though. We'll make that adjustment and then we'll cut the rest of them for real. Have it. Our door ends are cut. Now we need to determine how big of a panel do we need. Well, that's fairly easy. I know that this here is 19 and 15/16 across. My panel needs to be roughly that wide. I know that our rails are 23 3/4. Well, we've got to minus the 4 inches from these, our stiles, so that takes us from 23 3/4 down to 19 3/4. But we've also got a 1/2 inch dado in each one of our stiles. So add back 1 inch and you wind up with 20 3/4. So I need to make a panel now that's 20 3/4 by the what was it? Oh, talking too much here. By the 19 and 15/16. You would think doing my garage cleanup, I'd actually know where the wrench is for changing out the blade. I don't. But a channel lock works wonders. These Freud Diablo blades, guys, if you can afford one, they're amazing. I've had this blade here for, oh boy, at least 5 years now. Never been sharpened, probably should be, but it cuts fantastic. No matter what I'm looking to cut, it'll cut right through it. Now, because of the rotation of the blade, you don't have to worry about actually getting this nut all that tight now when you're putting it on. It should be tight, but you don't have to worry about it because of the rotation. It will just automatically tighten itself up as you're cutting. It's a beautiful thing. Normally I wouldn't be using a bead board, especially an MDF bead board, but I was given this stuff when I got all of the particle board that built the saw table. So I thought, well, as long as I'm making mock doors right now for the cabinets to make sure I can do them, go ahead and use some of this bead board because I probably won't use it anywhere else. Not to mention the piece that I have is broken right down about the center of it. So what the heck, let's give it a shot. And I did that, and wouldn't you know it, my wife actually likes the look of it. And I don't. So who knows? Maybe I can find some maple beadboard for it. After all, the kitchen, I want to make sure, remains my wife's domain, and the wood shop remains mine. So we might as well make it so that she likes what she has. As you can see, having this larger table is a huge help when it comes to cutting sheet goods. The one thing I'd like to do is, just as I've got a nice outfeed table, I'd like to have an infeed table as well. Someday. Now, if I was building these for real, I would go ahead and I'd find the center point of my door and line that up with the center point of one of the actual panels of the beadboard, so that everything would look nice and pretty. This is a mock-up. I don't much care, so I'm just going to measure it out and go with it. And if you're wondering why I'm not just going ahead and using the measure tape that came with the Shopfox, well, because again I'm looking at putting a longer bar on here, I haven't actually put the tape measure down. So, back to the old-fashioned way I go. And there's our panel. So now all I got to do is run inside, get some glue this thing up, and we're done. Now, one thing I'd like to point out is that I'm working with particle board, and I know it. I don't expect it to last any length of time. These here are just mock-up doors, so I don't destroy the actual wood that I'm going to end up using for the final project. So I'm going to actually go ahead and use a pocket screw to hold these together with the glue. The final build won't need it, but particle board, let's be safe, right? So this is the Kreg Mini that I finally broke down, went out and bought. It's pretty easy to use. I am actually lining it up almost to the end of our tongue here, and more towards the middle. It's exactly what I did on the other doors that I made this weekend, and it worked out very, very well. So we just got to clamp this in place. One of these days I'm going to go ahead and build that Kreg jig machine that Izzy put out there. That's an amazing tool. I've got to try that. I'm not trying to be too exact here. Yeah, close is good. There we go. Now, it's just some glue, some screws, and hey, we're done. So let's go ahead and use the fence to help out with that deal. The fence is nice and square. It gives us something to press up against. So let's go ahead and use that. Well, that's only slightly embarrassing. It seems now our dado has not been cut wide enough. Whoops. So it seems the material that I had before fit in the dado I made, and this stuff now that I'm using did not. So another good reason to use those screws, because we are definitely going to be loose on that tongue now. But live and learn. And that's why here on this program you'll always see the triumphs and you'll always see the not so triumphant. So now we pull out our cool drill press here that we made. I've got the backer board, the fence, whatever you want to call it here. This is definitely setting the depth of where, how far back in that rail we want our hinge board to go. The end of the board here is where I want to line up one side. I still haven't marked it over here. I'll get around to that one of these days. And yes, the spring has given out for holding my drill press upright. So all I've got to do is line that up and drill a couple holes now. Actually got a pencil mark on there right where I want it. So there we have it. We've got our holes bored for the hinges. All it's left to do now is to actually go and screw this thing on to the cabinet, and we're done with it. So why don't I go ahead and handle that, and I'll show you the finished product there. All right. Well, here you have it. The finished cabinet doors. I don't have all my cabinet doors made yet. As you can see, you're within my filthy kitchen right now. Yeah, so underneath the sink, that's where these doors went to, and I've got to get some knobs to finish them off. My wife is a Coke fiend, as in Coca-Cola. If you've watched my other video about the pantry shelves, you will have seen all the Coke that was in there. So for right now, there you have it. The knobs that I've been using for her are actual leftover caps from 2-liter Coke bottles. What can I say? They work. Hey, as well as that soft close feature. I kind of like that. Doesn't slam. It's kind of nice. I've got to pick up some more of those. Yes, over on this side, I actually did slab doors just to get an idea for the sizing, to make sure I felt comfortable with the sizes of the doors I was building. I even went ahead and put together a drawer front just to see how that was working out. Worked out pretty nice. My kitchen, I've got a long way to go on this build, but yeah, you'll be along for most of it. Sorry you weren't here for the beginning of it. But, oh wow, my knees are not made for crawling around on the floor anymore. But there you have it. Those are the doors that we just worked on building. They turned out pretty nice, I think, for what they are. Particle board and some MDF beadboard. The real ones will be built out of yellow birch. I think I'll head outside now and I'll show you a scrap piece of that I've got laying around.